is here to speak with us, so he's going to go first. If you haven't been to Hackformers before, it's open to everybody. Encourage you to invite people if you like it and talk about it on Twitter or any other social media. Hackformers is about Jesus Christ, and it's about information security, and it's a really creative, kind of bold endeavor where we talk about both. So first of all, typically we talk about security from a security professional's point of view. Pure security, nothing to do with Jesus or anything like that. So if people like security, there's always value there. And then we talk about Jesus, and typically it doesn't have anything to do with security. And the last part, we kind of tie them together and show how these actually two seemingly unlike things can kind of relate. Give all credit to God for that, but Paul's vision for his creativity and showing how these two things actually can relate and be brought together. So James Wickett is former president of OWASP Austin, is that correct? Yep. And a large figure in our industry and happens to be local. So without further ado, I want to give it to James Wickett.
All right.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, so I guess my wife talked to Austin because, like, I said I'm a large figure and I definitely need to lose some weight. So I think Weight Watchers might be on the agenda this year. We just had a new baby, and so like you kind of like your wife's pregnant, and so you like start eating, you know, like additionally, you're like, sure, ice cream at like 10 o'clock at night sounds awesome, you know, and a big old bowl of it, right? And so yeah, I've had a little bit too much of that. Well, today we're going to be talking about DevOps, and I think, and you may be like, well, like, why are we going to talk about DevOps? I thought this was supposed to be information security, but we're going to be talking more from the point of view of like some wisdom that's kind of come up in the DevOps movement, and that's with the word Proverbs. And then we're going to talk about, because Hackformers is a religious organization talking about like teach security, teach Christ, teach security in Christ, we're also going to talk about how some of the wisdom in the DevOps patterns and practices that people are using, how that also applies in our faith and in other areas of life as well. And a lot of times they're saying the same thing, and some of the wisdom that we arrive at is really useful and helpful for us and as we move forward. So that's the premise. We'll see if that actually works for you. If not, maybe you'll pick up some things on DevOps that might be useful for you, and we'll see. Okay, so this is my new daughter, and on the left there, and that's my other daughter, and Lydia on the right. And so Hazel is on the left is 5 weeks old. So. If I say like really stupid things or crazy things, it's because I'm not sleeping. So you just have to deal with it. And
it's the hormones, huh?
Yeah, and the ice cream at midnight isn't helping, right? So anyway, so I'm going to try to speak clearly and enunciate and actually say what I mean, but no guarantees really. So if you want these slides, the slides are on Bitly, and this is the link for it. You can grab those. And we're talking about Proverbs and wisdom because a lot of times when you think about the stuff that really matters, right, there's like a bunch of sayings like, what, like, I took the road less traveled and it mattered all the most, or yada, yada, yada. Anyways, but that's kind of the idea, like what we're looking at here. And we're looking at expanding into what it means in the DevOps space, and then how we can relate that to our faith. And so let's take a look at some like of core DevOps values and what those are, what those mean, those come from. So when Damon Edwards and Boccia Gloop or John Willis, those are two guys that they run the Devops Days, or they run the Devops podcast, and they always talk about CAMs, and there's been a lot of debate if like it should be clams, and we'll say why. But CAMs is culture, automation, measurement, and sharing. Now, it's like to say that DevOps equals CAMs is not really like true. But to say that DevOps CAMs is the embodiment of DevOps, like that would be true. And so culture is really important. So this is a really easy thing to remember, something that you can put in your head and think CAMs, and then or you could think clams, and then we'll talk about that. The L is lean, which we'll talk about later, because there's a lot of influence from the lean in manufacturing cultures. But DevOps is about a shift in culture. Tuning towards automation, moving things where you have like an automated type environment, where you measure a lot of things, and you make sure you know what you're doing, make sure you're actually providing business value, you're doing things in line with different parts of the organization. And then what's also important is the sharing aspect. And actually, now that I think about it, there's one thing I forgot to put in here I'll mention later, but sharing is really important, except when it's not, right? There are certain times you shouldn't share, but I'll say what those are later. But really empowering people in the organization, like to have like access to the data streams to make decisions. And so like, you know, developers have been doing this for a while with like, do customers like a blue screen or a red screen, you know? And then you can like do a little test and you can figure out like, oh, it's gonna be blue because we sell, you know, more widgets, you know, whenever it's blue versus it's red. But similarly, you can run other types of experimentation and analysis, both on your back-end operations and performance and scaling and all that, versus the same things you can run in you know, customer adoption, business metrics, and all that stuff. But a lot of it comes in from that whole point of like, you got to have the right. You can't just have one of these four things. If you just have like, or if you're missing one of these four things, it doesn't work, right? If you have all the measurement data and you have ways and tools and house to do the sharing, and everybody likes the automation piece. Like that's what everybody thinks of when they think of DevOps. Like they think of like Chef and Puppet and all that. But if you miss the culture piece, like you're totally going to miss the ball on what DevOps is. And people, you know, people do a lot of things where they call it DevOps and they think things are DevOps. But it seems I've seen a lot of organizations where they take an operations team or a sysadmin team or something like that, and they're like, you are now DevOps, and like now like go forth and DevOps, right? Which basically means like these poor suckers have now like been slapped with Chef or Puppet or whatever, and it's like go config management things, you know, and then we're DevOps now and we're like awesome, you know, and that's not really what DevOps embodies. Like DevOps is more about working together and not against each other or not apart from each other, but like aligning together in the same business vision, you know, whatever you're trying to deliver in the end, like trying to align towards that. And you know, we talk a lot about culture, and culture is one of those things where people sort of distill this to like a bunch of kegs, right? And like we have you know, beer 30 and ping pong tables and all that stuff, right? And that will bring our culture together, right? But like those things don't really speak to everybody, and actually those things aren't culture at all. And I love this quote in the book Remote, which is a book talking about the coming remote workforce, that how it's going to be influenced, how we're all, you know, moving to a remote society. But one of the things they talk about is like one of the objections often given to remote work is like, yeah, but they're not going to get our culture. Like if we start putting people like, you know, let them work from their house or work from other cities or have a distributed team, like our culture is just going to fall apart. But actually culture, then I'm just going to read this quote. Culture isn't a foosball table, it isn't a paintball outing in the forest, but really the best cultures derive from the actions people actually take, not the ones they write about in a mission statement. Newcomers to an organization arrive with their eyes open. They see how their decisions are made and that the care that's taken and the way that problems are solved and so forth. And so what actually instills culture in your organization is how you actually handle problems, how you make decisions, how you work together, and not, you can't just like patch over that stuff by like, you know, putting up a ping pong table in your office or making everybody get together for some sort of, you know, cultural event or outing. And part of this is, you know, take responsibility and don't blame others. So this is like a piece of DevOps wisdom. There's a whole like a lot of texts that have been written on like blameless postmortems. So like when the site crashes, when the thing gets hacked, when the thing goes down, you know, like everybody gets in the room and it's not like those guys over there and, you know, firing them or whatever. And I think, you know, that's the traditional approach in business, or a lot of times I hear people say, oh, you know, you read about like, I don't know, something bad that happens in business, you're like, well, somebody's going to get fired over that, right? Or my wife likes, when we watch football, we're Oklahoma Sooners, and we watch Oklahoma football, and let's say, you know, play just gets messed up. She's like, she always likes to say this. She says, he's going to be running bleachers on Monday. You know, he's going to be running laps around the stadium on Monday. You know, she like just wants to know that like that dude totally jacked up our chance of winning this game, and like he is going to pay for it. I'm sure of it, right? But the point of, and now I've found out this is being video recorded, so Man, that's a bummer. Hopefully she won't. But it is a kick to watch football with my wife. So she really she gets really excited about that. But the point of DevOps is like actually the team. It's like DevOps is more of a team kind of approach, right? It's not that dude dropped the pass or that dude misconfigured the systems or whatever. There is a culture where it's like, okay, let's work together. Like as a team, we're going to solve this. We're going to put things in place. We're going to work on those culture automation, measurement, sharing to help prevent future things, and like have an actual open discussion like adults. And that's sort of a progression. I'm sure you guys have been. Well, I don't know. Has anybody been in meetings where that doesn't happen? No, everybody else lives in a good world. Okay. Well, some of those meetings happen where people, get thrown under the bus and things like that. And so, maybe you just don't want to admit it that it's true, but that is one of those things that DevOps is trying to overcome. And DevOps is actually so if somebody was to define DevOps, one of the real common things people say, it's like, well, taking dev, taking ops, and merging them, right? And that's actually not a horrible definition because we did take the two words and put them together, right? And then we called it one word. But DevOps is really more about taking cross-functional people and groups that haven't worked together in the past and putting them together to solve problems collaboratively. And so really it doesn't stop at dev to ops, right? And some people would say DevOps is operations, finally learning how to do stuff like developers, instead of writing stuff up in a Word doc, they're actually writing code, right, and checking it into source control. But it's really about taking dev and ops and QA and product management and security and putting, aligning people to deliver product properly in the business and moving things together and sharing across those different groups, measuring across those different groups, automating as much as you can across those different groups, and have a culture of this positive culture delivering towards that. And so as we talk through this, we need to know that you don't know. And so there's a lot of things that you don't know, and you need to know that. And so because of that, you need to monitor all the things. And you need to make sure you're checking and you're getting data streams and you're figuring out ways to check out what's going on with the systems. The systems, the software, the services, all that stuff. There is a inherent transparency to customers that has arisen over the last few years where it's there isn't, you could think about it too in this way. We've now decided to consume all of our software instead of getting a DVD, in the mail, or go to. Has anybody bought software like Office Depot or Office Depot? Yeah, I told you, man, I'm not sleeping. So Office Depot or Walmart, or any places. But has anybody purchased a CD? Can you even do that anymore? I don't think so, right? But 10 years ago, that's what you did, right? It's I go to the store to buy the new latest Office. I wait in line to whenever it comes out. I guess the only thing now people do is video games for that, right? But it's actual software. No one's no one's doing that. And I think because we live in that new era where all of your software is being delivered and consumed as a service, and all hand wavingly all I'm saying, but now we're actually selling blocks of time and usage and performance and all that, right? And so I think part of that is how DevOps arose in the first place and how the need of saying the old ways we did stuff was fine. You shipped DVDs, you didn't care so much about downtime, you were able to be flexible. But now customers actually depend on your software to be up. When Gmail goes down, it's a big deal, right? I'm sure when the Microsoft version of Gmail goes down, a couple people care about it, right? 10 people care about it. And so, no, last time I actually spoke.
You have to realize we're speaking in the Microsoft.
I know. So actually, I was trying to work that in there because I was at Microsoft. I was at this building, this room, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and I was talking about OWASP or something, and it was to the Agile group, and I said something about everybody loves Apple or whatever, and they're no. So, anyways, now I'm just it's a challenge. Every time I come to the Microsoft building, I got to say something totally off base about that. All right, so we have transparency to customers. We also need to have transparencies to peers. So, the point on the transparency to customers business is now, how many times have you got like those letters from like Amazon, or you seen like the write-ups on the blog that we're so sorry we were down, you know, Netflix is like, you know, we didn't mean to like not let you watch your favorite videos from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. or what, you know, it's like you see a lot of that, right? And it's because people have learned like you got to be transparent to your customers. Like you can't just hide it and push it off. And that's the old way of doing business. The new way of doing business is like actually as much as you can be transparent. And there's good and bad scales of that. There's a whole bunch of literature on this as well. It's also, you know, implied that you need to do this with your peers. So like everybody collaborating around the same, you know, source control like GitHub or whatever, you know, or is meaningful that way. DevOps is actually like a really fun too, right? So a lot of DevOps, much like the information security community, really cares about memes, especially Boromir ones, right? And there's a few of them out there. I was supposed to be funnier than it was. All right, sweet. Laugh track. Can we edit that so like there was a little less gap? Okay. DevOps is also about servant leadership, where people will you know, go and try to serve others. This is a great quote about this. There's a book by Simon Sinek called Leaders Eat Last. Those who work hardest to help others succeed will be seen by the group as the leader, as the alpha of the group. And being the alpha, the strong, supportive one of the group, the one willing to sacrifice time and energy so that others may gain, is a prerequisite for leadership. And this is some of the literature that people are coming around and saying, like, this is important for us. We also, in the DevOps community, talk about like, things like doing painful things more often. You know, making sure like if it hurts to do it, like then you just need to like do it every week, every day, you know, until it like becomes really easy to do. And so pushing that up the stack instead of like, oh yeah, how am I supposed to update that whatever thing over there and apply that patch or do the thing, you know, it's like how do I do that? Well, just do it more often, and then like actually that'll help you solve your problems. And you'll actually learn to automate that a lot faster. A lot has been said and done around the continuous delivery. There's a great book by Jez Humble called Continuous Delivery, and I would totally recommend it. But you can basically get the gist of it here. It's like deploy faster, more often, you know. And a lot of people point back into the history of DevOps as there was a presentation by John Allspaw at Velocity Conference, and he said, Etsy is doing 10 deploys a day. And people, this is in 2008, 2009. And people were like, I think it's 2009. People were like, what? Like, people were freaking out because like you're only supposed to deploy to production like once a quarter, once a year, right? And Etsy's like, no, we do it 10 times a day. And they're like, everybody was freaking out. But that has actually been a business value, and it's actually a value to security as well. Infusion of lean into the team culture. So this is the one thing that's kind of debatable, but like the lean movement, making sure that you can do Kanban, and like make sure that everybody kind of is working in the same flow, and thinking of software as more of a manufacturing process instead of like just everybody just does whatever they want. We'll see what we get in a couple months, which is the traditional approach. And it kind of has been a thing where like bottleneck reduction has been an important part of our literature, has been an important part of our thinking. There's this old book called The Goal, which talks about how that is done in manufacturing. The Phoenix Project is basically a remake of The Goal, but as for like what it would mean for technology, and security is in there as well. And in that book, there's a great story of like how security actually goes from just being like audit, compliance, and all that stuff to actually making a difference to the customers in the end. And I think I would encourage anybody in the security community to read the Phoenix Project. Also, DevOps people are generally friendly. And have you ever heard the Ruby saying, like, Rubyists are friendly because Matt's is friendly? Has anybody heard that? Anybody in the Ruby community? It's like, it's because the guy who wrote Ruby is like really nice. So like, now all the Rubyists are really nice. And you kind of wonder if like they're on drugs sometimes. But same thing is true of DevOps, right? Like, Patrick this is the guy who like coined the word DevOps. He had the first Devops Days event. He is kind of like seen as the godfather of DevOps or whatever. But he would not assume that title, and he's very humble, and he's very friendly. And so, and he really super values community, so like that has kind of been transformed and spread out through our community. Devops Days is a local event, or it happens locally across the world, and it's a very community-first event. So in the morning, there's like scheduled tracks, but in the afternoon, it's like all open spaces where people get together. Very analogous to like B-sides, or some of the ways B-sides has been run, depending on which, how long you've been familiar with B-sides. Which all this kind of gets down to like, okay, we just spent like 15 minutes talking about like DevOps and yada yada, but how does this actually matter to information security? Because that's what Hackformers is, right? Hackformers is about information security and applying that. And so the mission of DevOps, because I think that it's more about, DevOps is more about delivering products to customers than anything else. And it's also inclusive of all to the mission. And so like, it's not just dev and ops, right? Security also plays in that. And I think that's like where information security's biggest chance right now is to join forces with DevOps. And like, I've called it like rugged DevOps, but you can call it whatever you want, but the idea is like, start finding ways to embed yourselves in the DevOps culture and see what happens, right? And here's some random like tips, and these may or may not work. These may be good ideas or bad ideas for your organization. But let's just read through them real quick. Monitor and instrument your code, right? Do it with security in mind. Learn some or one of the testing languages, RSpec, Cucumber, there's Python equivalents. Gauntlet is my project, and I would love for you to work on Gauntlet or take a look at that because it's a security framework built around Cucumber. Okay, learn how to like deploy security services with Chef or Puppet. Just like give it a run, like do a test lab. It's not super hard. And if you need help, like just ping me and I'd be happy to help you with that. Get familiar with tools like your development team uses. So if like everybody's collaborating around GitHub or I hope not Perforce, try to like, get involved in that, right? Whatever ticket management system they're using, use that ticket management system. Who cares if it's like not, doesn't fit your workflow or all this stuff, like figure out how to embed yourself into that so you're speaking the same language. Add security testing into your continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline. Somebody in your organization is probably talking about continuous delivery because all the CIOs are talking about continuous delivery right now. So there's somebody who's been chartered for that, and now's the time to like find that person and like inject some security testing into that pipeline, and like you'll be a hero, and it'll be really cool, and people will be excited about that. There's new projects out there I think that are really important to the security community, like Docker. Vagrant, I think a lot of people are familiar with by now, but if you haven't, like, try it out, test it out. If you're interested in like actually getting, like seeing some real live DevOps people, face to face, right? You can come to Devops Days Austin, and that's actually on Monday and Tuesday of next week. So I'm going to wrap up. I know I'm running short on time here, but that's kind of the teach security part. And so like the whole motto of Hackformers is right, teach security, teach Christ, teach security in Christ. I'm going to kind of munge the teach Christ, teach security in Christ into like one block here, and I have some other security or another little bit of one or two proverbs that are not related to this as well, but not related directly to Christianity per se. But let's take a look at that. So, the Bible has a lot to say about this stuff as well, and like having transparency in like your business and how you do business dealings. There's like a just balance and scales are the Lord's. All the weights in the bag are His work. So, what does that speak to? Like, that speaks to actually being transparent with how you conduct your business, how you do things. This one is not a biblical quote, and you may be offended by this, and I'm sorry if you are, but this has actually been really helpful for me in business. And I used to work with this guy, he's Bulgarian, and he would always like talk about this, right? And it's like, because the problem, a lot of times people want to pass the buck on to somebody else, and they want to pass the problem on to somebody else. And he would always say like, you should always ask this question to yourself. Because this is actually a really important thing. There's another one that was really important to me as well, instrumental to me in my as I've grown up over the years in the workplace. But my boss used to say he wrote a check that his butt couldn't cash, right? And I always think about that. He was saying about somebody else at the time. But I was thinking about it. I was like, man, like I don't want to be that guy. Like I want to be the person that people can depend on. And if I say I'm going to do something, I'll do it to the best of my abilities or give it a try, and try to do that. And be real careful, because I have the problem where I struggle where I'm like almost an unconditional optimist sometimes. I'm like, oh sure, we could do that in 2 days or 1 day or 2 hours, And it's like you start writing those checks, right? Like every time you start saying like I could do that in a day, I could do that, man, like that's not true. You can't do that stuff in a day. So. Anyways, I hope this one like sticks with you maybe. I think Also, I think there, huh?
No pun
Yeah, no pun intended on that, for sure. Culture and practice is a really important thing, and if you look at some things the Bible says about that, like the one who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin, but there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother, right? And so actually having friendship in your culture, and let's see, sorry about that, and making sure that you're like aligning yourself not with the unreliable people in the organization, but like working towards like a common goal and shared goal. And I think continuous delivery speaks to this. As like iron sharpens irons, so one man sharpens another. And this is a common biblical truth that has meant a lot to me as well. And like if we hold ourselves up to accountability, we hold ourselves up to being open and transparent with each other, like you're gonna have those moments where they're gonna be like, they're gonna feel rough, but they're gonna be sharpening moments. And like that's all continuous delivery is about. Because continuous delivery is, you know, you're taking your code, you're building it, testing it, pushing it into production, and a lot of times it's failing, right? And like actually getting that stuff working is actually pretty difficult, and like you have to keep working and working and working and working. And then sometimes you're continuously delivering, but you're delivering, you know, maybe not like actually what you should be delivering, right? Like you're delivering not quality for some reason. And so like you need to continue like working on that iron sharpening iron business. I also think it's interesting how like DevOps could make some sort of statement about this, like where Jesus assembled a cross-functional team. You know, like he put together the 12 disciples from a variety of backgrounds and socioeconomic statuses and put them together. But he gave them all a shared mission, which I believe is kind of the important part of the DevOps way as well. And this is Jesus talking. He said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you, and behold, I'm with you always to the end of the age." And so it's like it's not just like get together so you know we can have a good time. Gotta go back here one slide. Photo op for Mono, and then but you know we have this idea where like we're pushing towards something bigger, right? It's like it's not meant to just be like a silo, and like if DevOps just turns into like where the ops team is now called DevOps because they got a config management tool, like that's a fail, right? It's like actually needs to be alignment around the mission of the business, and that's what Jesus did here as well when he assembled his team. And lastly, this is the part that has been very important to me in my personal life. Is like, and this is where this is Paul talking to Timothy, and he says, "And what you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." And the point of that is like, it's inclusive, right? It's actually saying, hey, hey James, like you are not just meant to like come to know Christ and then that's it, right? Like you are actually learn what I've taught you, like go teach others. So it's actually like it's actually empowering, right? Because you're saying you have a bigger mission, which we just saw in Matthew 28:18 through 20, and then now we're seeing in 2 Timothy 2:2, where it's like your mission is actually bigger than that, and or your mission includes that, but here's like the how you're going to do that. You're going to go find other people. You're going to instill what you've learned from me. And you're going to instill that into others who are going to be able to teach others also. So there's like a reproduction, and so like has to spread throughout your, in the DevOps ways, it's got to spread throughout the organization. Otherwise, it'll just be a weird silo. But in as we look at the mission for life, and I think sometimes like that gets lost. I think a lot of times religion gets viewed as like a bunch of rules. Like there's a hierarchy of power where like the church leadership or pastoral leadership or are the ones who are like they're the professional Christians. They're the professionals who are supposed to do all the work. But this is actually not true. Like the truth is that we are all called to this. Like we are all called, and we're all empowered to that. And maybe you're hearing that for the first time. You think like that's pretty cool, and I would agree with you. Like that is pretty cool, and like it would be something like really worthwhile to think about, and to think that like. Like our goal is not to just, and there's other verses in the Bible I think that are also empowering in this way, that talk about like being part of the priesthood of believers. It's like everybody is part of that. Like the Great Commission, it's called the Great Commission for a reason. It's like actually for everybody, right? And there's a couple of slides back. And I don't know, like for me, like that is super important. It's very empowering. So I hope that that's useful for y'all as well. So here's my email if you have any questions about DevOps or anything about faith or anything in general, or you just want me to send you more pictures of my daughter, because I got like a whole CD full of those pictures, and so I'd be happy to do that as well.
All baby all the time.
Oh yeah, that's pretty much my life right now. So that's great. All right, any questions?
Thanks, James. I actually have a question.
Okay.
When you hear about DevOps, it's kind of an inclination not to really think about security, like just the words DevOps, right?
Yeah.
Is there any work being done in the industry to kind of incorporate security and make it become an integral part of DevOps? And there's work being done, but the nomenclature is what I'm talking about. So like software as a service, and now they're talking about secure software as a service, right? So,
I think that we'll see that over the next 3 years. So DevOpsSec, there's a group of people that have kind of been aligning about that. Some of the people from Etsy and other companies have been talking about like, okay, there's security folks that have lived in the DevOps organization. They've caught the bug, right? So Etsy and Twitter and other groups like that. And so like, okay, we got to do this as well. And they've been talking about aligning a conference, and I haven't seen where that is, but I think it's a Google group called like Security Can Be Your Friend Too or something like that. I don't know, it's kind of a funny name, but they're working on that. And I know that I end up talking a lot about like rugged DevOps and what that means, and taking the rugged idea and merging that, because a lot of things that are being said in the rugged world is the same as things being said in the DevOps world, and they're actually speaking about the problem maybe from two different angles, but they're kind of conjoined. I think that we'll see the Velocity conference, which is started out I don't know how many years ago, but it was a web performance and operations conference, and it's really weird because if you rewind like 5 years ago, you were like, Velocity, that's a weird idea. And because what is it? It's a bunch of like HTML and front-end JavaScript developers. I'm getting the thing, but JavaScript developers, front-end developers, and then it's also paired with like a whole bunch of back-end operations folks. And like people back then were like, I don't know like why we're at the same conference. Like we go to this track, we go to that track. But now it's actually there's so much crossover, right? Because like if you actually want to deliver sub 2-second response times to people, like that's why they built that conference. And all that to be said is like they've been having a renewed interest in, or a new interest in security, and that's like one of their core focuses for the next couple of years. So I think resiliency, security, and all that stuff has been really talked about a lot.
So it's going to be more than DevOpsSec is kind of the one that
Yeah, DevOpsSec. I mean, I think rugged DevOps is the way to say it, because it's like helping think about how we do it. But I mean, it's open to whatever. Yeah.
All right, thanks, James.
Okay.
One more time. Appreciate your time, and you get to your meeting on time. So next is Richard Stepens. Richard Stepens is one of the local leaders in the InfoSec industry here in Austin. He's on the board of Information Systems Security Association, and also has spent a lot of time in the industry as a security architect. Is that the way to put it?
Yeah, that's fair.
Right. So I'll let Richard get his setup ready.
Sure, it shouldn't take too long here.
So while Richard is getting set up, I just have a few things to add on. We have a couple of speakers being lined up. So next month we have Jared DeMott who's coming. Dr. DeMott is actually very well known in the security space for some of the stuff that he's been doing with the cutting edge EMET stuff, which is the Enhanced Mitigation Experience Toolkit, which is Microsoft security configuration toolkit. So he actually is a black hat speaker, blue hat winner of the $10,000 prize for breaking into systems. So he's very well known. He's actually going to be flying in from Michigan, and it's on June 6th. So I just want you to record that date. So June 6th, and then following that, we have, I'll probably be doing the Kali series, continuing with that for July and August, unless we get some other speaker that we've been trying to line up come. And then in September, we're going to be having Ed Skouris from SANS. He's going to be coming, and he's going to be speaking over here, and that's on September 12th. And then in October, Michael Howard from Microsoft for VR speakers. So we've got quite a good amount of good speakers that are lined up. So make sure you follow up and get those dates and share the word around as well. There are Bibles as well in the back for you to take. If you don't have one and you'd like to have one, feel free to take. So that's all I have to say.
Those are fantastic speakers. I'm really excited to hear from some of them, definitely, from all of them, actually. So usually, I have like company logos here for the companies that I've worked for. So it's a little different, just representing myself. So I use a small font there, just to make myself feel a little bit insignificant. Kind of put the responsibility not only for this presentation, but on kind of giving it to God. I love that saying. Sometimes, give the worry to God, but not the responsibility. I guess it is. So a little bit about me. I'm more blue team than red. So I'm more on the defensive side of it. I've spent pretty much my whole career on the architecture side of things. So I've looked at how to implement security tools, security products. I've been at 3 different vendors for the last decade. Now I'm at a reseller, so I get to touch just about any tool that I want to put my hands on, which is fantastic. The last 2 or 3 weeks, I've just geeked out with all the ETDR vendors. So taking a look at what it is that they have, what it is that you can use. ETDR is endpoint threat detection and response, just new ways to be able to respond to malware in your environment. My wife, as I was writing this slide, she came in there and she was standing behind me and she said, "Hey Richard, what do you mean you're more blue team than red?" It's like, does that mean you're a Democrat? I said, no, it doesn't mean I'm a Democrat or Republican. It's just, I guess, the way we describe ourselves here. The other thing that I thought would be important for everybody to hear is that although, I've been a lifelong Christian, kind of grew up in a Christian household, kind of you lose your way, you find your way back. I really haven't spent a lot of time studying the Bible. I haven't really spent a lot of time, my adult life actually getting into depth. So I thought it might be interesting to go through 2 different components here. One was, how do you simplify, I guess, security? And the other part was, all right, now as Richard Stepens is getting into learning about the Bible and researching the Bible, what's that same thought process that I go through? So it's a little bit different of a presentation, but it seems like we're going to get a lot of different today, both from Wickett and myself. So you guys know the motto here, right? Teach security, teach Christ, teach security in Christ. So I think it's really interesting to look at security from the most atomic capabilities. I think I've seen this said in a couple of different instances now, where people are looking at indicators of compromise, right, from the most simplistic forms that we can. So there's registry settings. Some of those are interesting, some are not. Being able to watch your registries could be intensely interesting, especially for persistence purposes, right? Looking at the run once, seeing if something is actually persistent across a reboot. Have you had any new installations that will insert a registry to be persistent? So I know we've got a big community here that is interested in trying to identify pieces of malware inside of your organization that haven't been identified by anybody else. And I know that's what we all struggle with, right? How do you identify these particular pieces of malware inside of your environment? Users, right? I think Michael from B-Sides, he gives a great presentation about this. Being able to transition from not only watching the users but also watching what the users are doing, right? We all have to own security from a large perspective, and being able to see that 95% of your user base probably shouldn't change their group memberships, on a daily basis, so why not just watch everybody, watch their group memberships. Also, file systems, there's probably shouldn't be a lot of activity, unknown activity going on in program data, system 32 drivers, right? Shouldn't be updated all that much, and if it does, what does it hurt for you to actually identify, what's going on, inside the registry? The Commander PowerShell, I think, is a big one. There are probably 98% of users out there that have no reason to ever touch CMD or PowerShell. Right? So if they are accessing it, how easy is it for you to identify now a potential malicious actor inside of your environment, right? So logging all these things is not inconsequential, and that's one of the reasons that I was taking a look at ETDR applications, because there's a lot of ETDR applications that are doing this for us nowadays. It seems like they're getting acquired left and right too. We had a San Antonio company that just got acquired. Other vendors are acquiring ETDR vendors or trying to create their own ETDR kinds of applications. And then you get into the combined IOCs, right? These are going from your atomic indicators more like to molecular indicators, to use the chemistry terminology still. Those combined IOCs, IOCs, like Notepad exe, there's probably not a lot of reason for it to use a network connection. So if it is, right, those are things to worry about. But again, those are things that are pretty hard to identify unless you have specific applications looking for it. So when you combine these IOCs, this is something that the AV world has been doing for quite a while, right? They've been combining IOCs with heuristics, behavioral analysis. Heuristics is interesting. You can use it to find known bad or variants of known bad, right? The whole idea with heuristics is you want to take an educated guess when like a really, really large search is essentially is impractical at some point or another. So essentially, the way I look at it is, let's say you're going to do a Google search, right? How confident are you that you're going to be able to put terms into the Google search that will guarantee you that the top return is going to be the website that you're interested in, right? So you've got to simplify it as much as possible, but you've got to be as specific as possible also. So maybe you want to put their domain name, you maybe want to put the content of, whatever web page that you're interested in on that domain name. Behavioral analysis, on the other hand, typically runtime or pre-execution. I don't know if you guys have spent a lot of time, in the anti-malware space, but you'll find, quite a bit of stuff is runtime analysis. Runtime analysis is, hey, once the malware is executing, what am I going to do with it? Am I going to be able to find it? Am I going to be able to identify it? Pre-execution analysis, I think, is a little bit tougher. Those are like your scheduled scans. You find a piece of file that you're now, okay, I'm interested in trying to figure out what it's going to do. How many cycles do I have to go through to unpack it, right? Do I have to go through 100, 200, 600 cycles, from the CPU? Do I have to go through 1,000? At some point, it becomes impractical, and you start to slow your systems down, right? So a lot of these combining IOC mechanisms, can be very fruitful on one hand, but also can be extremely burdensome on another. There used to be major issues with things like behavioral analysis and heuristics when applied to HIPS technologies. But I noticed probably starting about 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, that a lot of these vendors, they started to create mechanisms where they can double check, those potential malicious files, right, and guarantee that they're malicious. So they go from suspicious to malicious via some cloud check. I think a lot of the mechanisms out there via the cloud, they're either doing whitelisting or blacklisting at that point. So you're going back to the atomic IOCs at that case, and you're using checksums in order to verify, all right, I've used, these combined IOCs, there's some potentially suspicious behavior. Now how do I verify that it's truly malicious? Go back to your unique checksum. So we'll give you an example of IOCs. This is something I got from Krebs. I don't know if you guys read Krebs on a daily basis, but I try and do. He's got some fantastic stuff on there. Usually comes out with some cutting-edge reporting. But this is something I did with regards to the target incidents. This is Black POS. So you get a screenshot on the right-hand side of some of the IOCs for Black POS, right? I thought there were the most interesting part of this article is actually when he mentions that that Black POS, you can see it on the left-hand side, near the middle. Black POS, a relatively crude but effective crimeware product. So a lot of times, these crimeware, technologies are just being repackaged left and right. So if we can identify, again, those definitive IOCs, we can use them across our environment and be pretty productive at it. So, all right, now that we reviewed the IOCs, what can we actually do with them? This is what your typical instance response scenario should look like in most environments. Anywhere from running antivirus, run malwarebytes, right, system terminal tools, search the webcast, search any of the system32 folders, the driver folders, whatever it is that you're interested in. Then collect those IOCs and disseminate them through the rest of your environment. But the rest of most people's environments, could look like this. This is an architecture slide that, I just recently kind of put together to help a lot of my customers visualize what security could look like in your environment, how complicated it could be in your environment. And there's a plethora, right, of different technologies you can implement. Anything from the right-hand side where you've got, agents on endpoint, right, tons of agents on endpoint. To, your endpoint connectivity layer, to your DMZ, your corporate network, your internet. Wickett would actually like this. I actually put a development environment in there, right, because you're not supposed to, post directly to production, right? From my perspective, this is where I think a lot of people just get analysis paralysis, and they see security as now this really, really complex being, when you could probably put some rules in place to simplify it. And I know, at some point when you don't really understand the industry, and you're now trying to analyze, for instance, I told you I was doing some work on ETDR, trying to analyze the endpoint. What is it that you understand about the endpoint? What is it that you understand about what we're doing today? And then what is it that you actually need, right? So it's all need-based at some point. And you're not going to really put another agent on the desktop unless there's some severe need. So you've got antivirus, right? Advanced endpoint, application containerization, incident response. That's where ETDR applications kind of fit in. When I kind of think about what it is that I want to do and how I want to analyze, how do I want to bring those ISEs, to analyze what it is about, a particular product or technology that might be useful in my environment. I start to, this I think is a fundamental tool set, taking a look at the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain. The cyber kill chain is a fantastic way to kind of view what malware does in your environment, how it operates in your environment. You've got recon, weaponization, delivery, exploit, CNC, and exfiltration. Recon, kind of your port scans. Right? Weaponization, that's what the malware author is doing. It's real hard for us to protect against weaponization unless you're in DevOps, I guess, right? Unless you're developing the code, right, that could potentially be exploited. Delivery, the actual transmission, via email, via websites. Exploit is when now your malware is running on your system. CNC and exfiltration, right? And that's where the pain begins. So one of the things I did a while ago, it's about 9 months ago, I put together a slide that kind of gives people an understanding, or at least a better understanding, of where the pain happens, right? So if you're going to be proactive, and purchase a tool, right? Spend the time to implement that tool sets. At what point do you really need to start worrying about what that tool could do to protect your environment? And from my perspective, really the pain starts at the exploit phase, right? That's the phase that hopefully through recon and weaponization, you've got a lot of exploits that kind of die from defense and death technologies. Exploit phase is now where code is executing on your desktop or laptop. And then you've got a complicated series of steps to be able to get to that exploit stage, right? From the delivery phase, where you can block it via your networking tools or your email tools. This kind of talks about IT rationalization. So when you're proactively blocking things, your white line here is going to drop lower. Right? So you're going to get less threats that make it to the exploit phase. Right? When you're reactively addressing issues, your data loss and your remediation time is going to go lower. So that's the other, the blue, and is that more of an orange line on the right-hand side? So it's really two fundamental problems that you could be addressing inside of most environments. From my perspective, I always choose proactive versus reactive. It just makes sense. If you can put something in line, a new tool set, a I know networking guys, they hate putting new tools in line. But if you can put a new tool set in line to be able to proactively block, pieces of malware inside of your environment, I say all the better, right? As opposed to now you're at the exfiltration phase, right? There's a loss of recognition, loss of brand, there's data that's potentially lost. Now you've got to worry about getting those ETDR applications inside of your environment. Hopefully it's the last thing that you have to do. All right, so when I think about church and technology in general, right? I think about a TED Talk that I saw a while ago, and it was a gentleman by the name of Carl Honor, and he said, and I say this to a number of different people, just because I love the saying. We used to walk, now we speed walk. We used to dial, now we speed dial, right? We used to date, now we speed date. And it got me thinking, we used to church, right? Now do we speed church, right? Do we go in on Sundays, and just listen to our preacher, sing a couple of songs, and that's what I was doing for a number of years, which is fruitful in and of itself, and you can probably get a lot of value out of it. But I thought, what if I applied the same rigorous mechanism that I have, applied to my security research when I'm putting products in front of customers and trying to solve problems to, the problem that I have, right, where I'm the product and I need to be analyzed. So I started, right? So first thing was, what's the most atomic level, right, that you can get inside of the Bible, right? And it's going to be the language that it's written in, maybe the original language that it was written in. So if you don't know what this is Hebrew. Hebrew is a fascinating language, so over the past couple of months I've taken a look at it, dived as deep as my mind will allow me to dive into Hebrew, and it's amazing, right? So the first two letters of the Hebrew alphabet are Oliff and Beit, right? So those are on the right-hand side, so you read it from right hand to left-hand side. The other thing is, all of these letters in the alphabet also represent numbers, right? So you've got your 1 and your 2. If you think about it, right, Oliff Bet, right, it's almost like alphabet, right? That's where we get most of that stuff from. So the other part that I thought was interesting is, kind of when you dig into it, right, Torah comes from the word law or instruction. Right? So when we look at the Torah, right, it basically is the first 5 books of the Bible, right? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. I have a screenshot of this that I got from one of the Android apps that you can get, to see what the translation looks like in between Hebrew if you're ever interested in taking a look at this or taking a more in-depth look at this. I thought there was a lot of interesting parts to this, and the more you analyze and study, what's in the first, 5 books of the Bible. I mean, I couldn't even get past the first sentence without basically putting enough content on 3 different, PowerPoint screens to be able to talk about. Genesis, 1 is in the top left-hand side, top right-hand side. You'll also see Genesis 1. You'll see 1 is represented by Oliff over there. It's just, again, it's from right to left, right? You also see that Genesis is also in the beginning, right? So you see the same exact phrase that represents Genesis on the top right-hand side is right below it that basically says in the beginning. Some of the other things that you'll find in there is also a reference to God. God is the third phrase there. I don't know if you guys can see this very easily, but it's right there. That also begins with an Oliff. Right? So when you start to look at Hebrew, Oliff was extremely important. Oliff holds a special place in the Hebrew alphabet. It's a father of all letters, right? It was said to, well, there's I guess, some notes, some people believe that the Hebrew alphabet was created before time existed. And if you unravel the Hebrew alphabet, if you unravel that alphabet that was, that was used, then you would kind of unravel the existence of the universe. I think it's just an interesting concept, however you want to take that. It's used in many of the names of God, right? If you look at Oliff on the very top right-hand side, you can see there's kind of a hand pointing up and there's a hand pointing down, right? So it's two hands separated by, and that mark that slashes across the middle is a nail, right? So if you look at that, it almost symbolizes, it's almost like a precursor to a symbolization of what's going to happen. The top hand is reaching to heaven, right? The bottom hand is reaching to earth. It represents the number one. So most people say, why didn't the Bible, right, begin with Oliff then? Especially when God is written as a third word there, right? You could have had, God in the beginning created the heaven and earth, right? So there's an interesting part to this that I ended up finding. It says that there was a midrash, right, which is, I guess, a fable, right, that asked why Oliff was not selected as the first letter of the Torah. In the story, all the letters became before the Lord, giving reasons why they should be the first letter. All that is, except for the letter Oliff. When the Lord asked why, Oliff explained that since he was silent, he had nothing to say. But the Lord honored Oliff's humility and declared him to be the first of all letters and to be honored as the letter of the first word in the Ten Commandments. Right? So Oliff, again, makes another appearance in the Ten Commandments. Lord, which is that third word, is Elohim, yeah, which is God of Israel, right? And it begins with Oliff. Bara is in between where you see Genesis and Elohim, right? Bara is another interesting one. And I've got the symbol for it in the bottom right-hand side, right? So Bara is created by combining a couple of letters. One is Beit, and the other one is Oliff. And it actually means creation, right? So now you combine, the first and the second letters. The first letter being, something that represents God, and the second letter, which actually represents home. So that's Beit, right? So this middle version of Beit is a pictograph version. I think that was a precursor to the version on the left-hand side. And you can see, kind of the pictograph or how it came to be, and actually how it represents be, from our language today. I thought that was pretty interesting, especially the way the pictograph version, it came from representing a tent, right? So if you can imagine, kind of this squiggly line as a tent, the outside entrance is where the men would sleep, right? And the inside entrance is where, your women and your children would sleep. As I said earlier, a lot of the Hebrew alphabet letters are used to represent numbers, right? So there's a study about that called gematria. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's again, another fascinating thing that you can find inside of any language, I'm sure, is just normal correlation. The significance of Beit is pretty interesting, though, right? So if you think of gematria and you think of Beit, representing two. There was Oliff, right? There was God alone, right? Until he created everybody and everything. And, in order to procreate, right, you have to have two, at least with human beings. You have heaven and earth. You have man and woman. You have sun and moon, right? So Beit's number, right, is two. So a lot of people think that, all right, now the significance here is, God is creating a universe where man can live in, right? If you take another closer look at the Hebrew version of Beit, right, on the left-hand side, there's three sides to it. And remember, this is at the very beginning of Genesis, and it was read from right-hand side to left-hand side, right? So there was a wall on the right-hand side, and that was the very beginning. The wall was there because there was nothing before it, right? The roof was there, right, because, men aren't able to see into what's happening in heaven, right? And the floor is there so that you couldn't fall out of the universe, right? There's only one direction to go, right, and that's forward. Again, from right to left. So, if you look at the Hebrew language a little bit more, again, these are all fascinating things from my perspective, so I spent a lot of time taking a look at this, and I wanted to share with you guys. Abba, right, is Aleph Bet Aleph, right? So that means father, right? So the combination of, again, Oliff and Bet, kind of shows, how important not only the numerology was, but also the characters word that you were using. Another neat word that actually applies to Microsoft, I guess, is emmet, right, which is on the bottom right-hand side. Emmet is supposed to mean truth, right? So I don't know if Microsoft knew that when they created emmet. Yeah, but I guess now they do. So doing that little bit of Hebrew research that I did and taking a look at it and understanding it gave me a lot more confidence too, that understanding those atomic indicators helped me understand some other parts of the Bible, right? So I put a kind of a plan for myself to get more inundated, and I figured I'd share that with you guys also. When you look at combining those indicators of compromise, and then we've got the Lockheed Martin, we've got OWASP Pop 10, right? We've got SANS 20 critical controls. We've got all these controls in place for us to be able to go ahead and say, all right, now I understand what it is that I need to do in order to get better at computer security inside of my organization. For me, we've got the 10 Commandments, right? That's great. Well, what other ways could you kind of research the Bible and kind of understand what's in the Bible? So I started looking through a couple of concepts. I came across sola scriptura, right? It's a concept where you're basically saying any truth necessary for our salvation is going to be either taught in the Bible explicitly, right, or implicitly inside of the Scripture itself, right? So if you just had a Bible, right, you could find salvation, right, even if there was nobody else, right? If you had one thing on a desert island that you wanted to take, what would it be? It's not a claim that every truth of any kind is in the Bible, right? So it's not going to say, hey, there's a truth in Java code in the Bible, right? There's no truth in DNA works or jet engines, right? It's not all truth, but it is consisting of 100% truth. So how do you validate what you're doing is right, right? I think that's the whole idea about sola scriptura, is what do we do in order to validate? How do we understand, what we're doing on a daily walk is right? And that's where, you kind of, from my perspective, started looking at sola scriptura and saying, all right, yeah, I can go to a church, but that's not, that's teaching about the Bible, right? If I really, really want to, get solid in my walk, right, I probably need to pick it up, and start reading through it. I start needing to understand, the root of some of the words that were used, so I can actually analyze exactly what's going on, underneath the covers. Other places where I would definitely suggest are in the New Testament, right? There's the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Fantastic places to understand what the life of God, or excuse me, what the life of Jesus was. I really appreciate also kind of the red letters, and I know that there's a movement called the Red Letter Christians, and there's a lot of really cool concepts there with regards to analyzing red letters and the red letters that were in the Bible, right, or marked in the Bible, or those things that apparently came from Jesus, that we think came from Jesus. In some cases, I think debatable, but in most cases, absolutely. That wasn't actually published. Red letter Bibles weren't published until a little over 100 years ago, in 1899. Right, so they're kind of a relatively new concept, but definitely interesting. I think that when we start to focus in on the red letters, when we focus in on the Gospels, right, we can kind of get back to the basics, right? Love, peace, family, helping people in poverty, as opposed to the more politicized, version of Christianity, right? Where you're talking about things that, probably Jesus might not have cared too much about. Last but not least, topical. For me, there's an interest in trying to obtain knowledge. I've always been curious and had questions about specific things. So I just started looking a lot, like creation, right? I don't know how many people really think about the creation a lot. I'm sure a lot of you do. But from my perspective, it was always what was the day before the sun was created? On the third day. Genesis 1 verse 14, and God said, "Let there be lights in the vaults of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times." Right? So to me, it's interesting. You get that, on the fourth day instead of on the first. So I'll leave you with this, 2 Corinthians 11:13. Oh, that's supposed to say but.
But it's a tech talk. So
Appropriate.
Yeah, a bit. It just snuck in there, I guess. But I'm afraid, just as Eve was deceived by the serpent's cunning, your minds may somehow be led astray from your sincere and pure devotion to Christ. So that's something that I take to account of myself very deeply. So that's all I had to share today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, perfect timing.
Thank you.
Well, it's 1 o'clock, so we try to respect everyone's time. If you want to stick around a little bit, I think we have the space for a little while, but otherwise, thanks for coming.
Thank you. Very good.